Will, talk to me.
ABC Tuesday.
They took his daughter. She's coming home alive.
Will Trent, the series critics are calling powerful must-see TV, continues to thrill.
Shouldn't we strategize before we go in there?
If we screw up this case, a cop killer walks free.
With the riveting conclusion to a 2-part season premiere.
GBI!
Help me!
Get down!
Will Trent, all new Tuesday on ABC and stream on Hulu.
This episode is brought to you by FedEx. FedEx knows running a small business is hard enough without the hassle of shipping. That's why there's FedEx One Rate. With FedEx One Rate, you can ship your holiday packages cheaper than the post office for as low as $14.50 for small boxes. Visit FedEx.com/OneRate for details. Exclusions apply. Valid through January 19th, 2025. FedEx One Rate. 2-day retail shipping, one flat rate.
To realize the future America needs, we understand what's needed from us. To face each threat head on. We've earned our place in the fight for our nation's future. We are Marines. We were made for this.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the king of catch, the king of sting, the Ayatollah of rock and roller, the master of disaster, the toast of the coast, the one and only Mr. Chris Crossan. Now, and the crowd go wild, right? So I had to do all that, guys, because if you don't know who I'm about to speak to, then first of all, shame on you. But more importantly, we'll delve into like our history when I first met Chris. But Chris is one of the only guys I know in not just the UK, but he'll be quite embarrassed when I start throwing these names out. I rate him as highly as Eric Paulson, Josh Barnett, dare I say it, Hackenschmidt, Gotch, characters, Farmer Burns. If you don't know who they are, then shame on you as well, guys. Get on Google afterwards, right? The reason I put Chris in this is because not only is he a wicked martial artist and a really, really great human being, but he's one of the only guys that I know that is, when it comes to grappling and wrestling, he's like a historian as well as a practitioner. So after all of that, Chris Crossan, thanks for joining us, man.
One introduction, thank you very much.
Yeah, but you were well worth it, bro. You're well worth it. So I'm going to give a little bit of background and we'll get into it. So the thing is, I mentioned the king of catch, right? So you're literally one of the only guys that I know that's legitimately outside of Wigan Snake Pit, right? In the UK, who is, I would say, a catch wrestler. And we're both grapplers now. Bear in mind, we'll get into it when we start talking about this. I thought I could wrestle till we actually first met. Yeah, because you were the first. You were literally one of the first English guys that I met who was a brown belt, and I was like, "He's a brown belt." I think you'll remember because we'll get into this.
Yeah, I remember.
Bit, right? You remember how we actually met up?
The great John Will seminar.
The great John Will seminar, and there was great Chris. If you don't mind me, I'll just set the scene a little bit, right? So, I got into Jeet Kune Do. We'll mention Jeff Thompson later as well. So I was training with all these guys, and I first met John Will. And the minute I met John, I was like, if he was doing Tai Chi, I'm going to follow him, just because of his attitude, his take on literally not just martial arts but life, everything. And I was like, I've got to follow this guy. And then we actually started hosting him, and I wasn't in any way. I know that some of you guys who are watching this now can't believe this is the way it was. But there was no hosting a guy because you wanted to be aligned to him or to be associated to it. It was just you thought he was a really cool guy, and it was the good old days of the Wild West. Remember that, Chris? Where you could go training with people, and it didn't matter what team you were with. Like, for the next 5 minutes, you're going to try and kill me. I'm going to try and kill you. We'll do that part, and then we'll meet up afterwards, and we'll talk about how we can more efficiently beat each other up. And yeah, and I remember you rocking up. I remember you having like an old school Gracie Barra gi on and the brown belt. And then it worked out we weren't going to do gi. We were doing no gi. And I had to lend you a pair of shorts. Yeah.
Gee, it was strong.
Yeah, exactly. And trust me, it was one of those moments. And I won't lie, it's a defining moment in my training because I remember watching you move, and I was like, right, okay, in Thai boxing and striking, I can get away with wearing the Punisher Muay Thai shorts. And I said to you, I said, you're not going to be embarrassed by wearing these. And I only knew you by reputation then. I hadn't met you. But I lent you a pair of Thai shorts that had the Punisher logo on the front, right?
Yeah, T2Ortiz style.
T2Ortiz. So that's hopefully set the scene that we actually know each other quite well. But we're going to start right at the beginning because it's the best place to start. Chris, where did you start in martial arts?
A long time ago, in a land far away in Stockton-on-Tees. It would have been 1986. Mugendo kickboxing it was.
Mugendo?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, man. I remember Mugendo. Yeah. So what happened there? What drove you to go there?
You know, everybody in my school really was training, apart from me. And it was a type of school where, you know, north of England, plenty of fights every day. And the fights were turning more and more like, you know, it was the Jean-Claude Van Damme era. People were throwing round kicks. It was like, the fights were wild. So I thought, I've got to get into a bit of this. So, you know, I'd start going there the odd time because Kaiora Hall was adjoining our school. And we had a good club there. The coach, Mick Tully, he just got a silver in the WACO, Europeans. Another guy, Marty Mandeville, he became my coach later on down the road. He got a gold at the WACO. And, you know, there'd be crazy sparring sessions to sit all of us kids down and they'd just be getting at it, like roundhouse kicks, back fists, like broken noses, people getting knocked out. I just thought that was what every class was like. You know, I didn't know any different. I guess it was back then. We'd all sit there with our legs crossed, just like, whoa, look at this. And that was my introduction to martial arts. I was like 10, 11. I'd go on and off. You know, if I ever had the money, I'd go. It was quite expensive for that time. Then when I was 14, I started to train like English Contact Karate Association karate, which was head instructor was Deb Barrett, who I'm sure you'll know, being from Coventry.
I teach at Deb's school.
Wow, really?
Yeah. I teach. I was a sensei. Like, hopefully, I'm still trying to get him. The thing is, he is literally Benjamin Button, who does a sidekick. He's getting younger looking now, and we were talking about this. You won't mind me saying it. I think Sensei Deb's last birthday was 75 or 76, and he is still like. I'll give you an idea, right? Again, for the guys who are watching, if they don't know who Dev is, the last time I had Daniel Linero come over and train, right? So Daniel, the awesome Daniel Linero, you know, for me, he's like the next generation of what JKD guys are looking like, yeah. And him, so Sensei Dev and Sensei Johnny Johnson they both came up and trained as literally as white belts. Wow. Picked up the sticks, and then Sensei Dev was going, "You should have warned me. We should have done some training beforehand." I said, "Sensei, 2 or 3 hours of swinging the stick's not going to get either of us ready for this. Just drink from the fire hose and enjoy it." So you were in with Eka.
Fantastic, yeah, and under Arjan Barry Norman, which was a total blessing that I found Barry, because he's a fantastic coach. And also started going through to Barry's gym up in Newcastle, which was a Thai boxing gym, which was a proper rough old school gym, like full of rough men. You know, for instance, it didn't have a sign or anything. You go there, the police shutters back, you go in, people are fixing cars or ringing cars, whatever they were doing. It was like dodgy. You know, you went through this back room, you went up some stairs. There was an old school Thai boxing ring, weights, mirrors. It was that for me was like the perfect environment, you know, to be training martial arts. So then I also started doing amateur boxing. So from the age of 14 to 18, I was doing like Eka, Muay Thai, and boxing, like cross training in the striking arts. A little tiny bit of judo a couple of times, but I was more for the striking. From like the ages of 14 to 18, I was heavily into the striking arts.
Well, if you don't mind me saying, right? So, like, yeah, I'm obviously a little bit older than you, but we're from that same era. You know, we trained exactly at the same time. Bob Sykes, I do like Bob, as I always say to Bob. Bob could have been a kingmaker. Bob came out with a great line years ago when he said, when people say now, why doesn't a round kick to the head work on the street? And he said, back in the day it did. And Bob just straight away went, because we believed it would.
Yeah, exactly.
And the minute he said that, because like you've hit on something that I wasn't even really going to think about this, but the minute he said it, the old grey matter started firing off in my head a little bit. We are, I don't know if you would agree with me on this. Martial arts is a very, very era-driven industry.
100%.
So you had the Kung Fu boom, right? And then, as you said, like but like as I always say, it wasn't Bruce Lee who got me into martial arts. It was Mr. Miyagi. Yeah, and it wasn't even that he was any good at fighting. It was just the fact that like Ralph Macchio wasn't that good looking. He ended up with Elizabeth Shue. So come on, for a wingman, you know what I mean? Miyagi was a pretty cool guy. But then you had that striking period, and then thank goodness we didn't dive too much into the Steven Seagal bit. You know what I mean? Yeah, like running.
Yeah, Uncle Gene saved the day.
Uncle Gene did save the day. We'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, we missed out on that, and then obviously this is what's going to hopefully see us in nicely to where I think you'll be there. You'll have been in the jumping in point, same as me. Was we believed that the striking arts were. Now, every doorman you met, it was always really funny because every doorman that I ever met that was really, really effective was just a quiet judo guy. And it was always cool because, again, as I said, because everything is circular and everything goes, it just keeps coming back round, right? And back in the late 80s, early 90s, you went out on a Saturday night, you went out dressed like a bank manager. Everyone always wore a suit. And you see these guys in Coventry knocking each other out. And the most effective doormen were always the judoka because they were like, guys wearing a double-breasted suit. Well, he's asking to be in a fight here. And it always seemed to work. But then I don't know whether or not, now I'd like your thoughts on this because this isn't where we were going to go, but we'll get to wherever we'll end up anyway. But Chris, do you think that the fact that they aimed judo and, yeah, I know you're heavily into sambo as well, right? Do you think because they aimed it as a more of an athletic pursuit than a martial art, you know, the whole Chinese temple thing, because it was just an athletic pursuit, do you think that's why people like sort of almost, I wouldn't say devalued it, but they didn't look at it like, you know, you remember us back in the day, a black belt in karate, ooh, he was a killer. Judoka, he just seemed like some guy that used to throw a few kids around in a hall until you actually saw a judoka work. So with your thoughts, would you say that it was our perception of it being more of a sport that didn't make it so deadly? And that, which is going to lead me into the question is, and that was why it was such a surprise when the UFC kicked off, that skinny guy in that ill-fitting gi was able to beat them all up.
It's a great question, isn't it? It's a great question. It's food for thought. Maybe the fact that judo, it's a do, it has a way. They're very respectful judoka, aren't they? You know, they're not really going around giving it the big end. They're not shouting. They're quietly confident. They're highly skilled. And if you look at judo, you're not allowed to celebrate, for instance, when you win. I really like judo and the sambo sports like that. But I think that the media, you know, obviously the Bruce Lee era, it was all striking. In this country, we grew up with boxing and whatnot. And I think that a lot of people thought grappling was a work as well because of obviously the World of Sport days, although some of them men could definitely grapple for real, you know, but obviously there was all the work going on. And I think that that was the big reason we were just brought up with striking. If you look in the movies, you know, Clint Eastwood's having punch-ups, Charlie Bronson's having punch-up, everybody's having a punch-up, and nobody's really shooting in for takedowns and whatnot. But what happens in every fight you have growing up, it ends up a scuffle, doesn't it? People are rolling about on the ground. Larry Holmes, Trevor Berwick, I think it was, two world-class boxers, end up rolling about on the ground. Not that many years ago, we had Chisora David A rolling about on the ground, Tyson Lennox Lewis rolling about on the ground. You know, the ranges, the striking ranges, the kicking ranges, the punching ranges, we can move in and out of. Once we're in that grappling range, we're there to stay. So I think that's, you know, even back in the day, there was it was the Fairbairn and Sykes, one of the guys, I can't remember which it was, that said that a good puncher will always beat a good kicker, and it said a good grappler will always beat a good puncher, and it said a 14-stone docker or a 14-stone rugby player will always beat the 9-stone karate expert. I remember reading that as a kid, and I thought, yeah, there was something to it. I remember reading Terry O'Neill's fighting arts. Obviously mentioned Terry O'Neill. There's a man that could knock you out with a roundhouse kick. You know, that was his thing. But he said about the importance of being huge. When I was reading, I was a skinny little kid, and I thought, yeah, you know, it's important. Look at what we have in combat sports, weight divisions. And I know that Hoyce Gracie kind of flipped that on the head, didn't he? Because he was a skinnier guy, but he was highly skilled, wasn't he? And, you know, we saw what happened in UFC 1. It changed all of our life, I guess. It changed the life of martial arts 100%. It changed the full culture of martial arts, I believe.
Yeah, well, it did. It changed everyone's perception of it. Like I've said several times in interviews, and I've really had to examine, because it used to be a bit of a throwaway line, because I didn't really examine my feelings when I used to say this. I know this is going to sound really cosmic when I say this, but I remember the first time I saw the UFC first. I saw the Gracie in action. So I saw that, and I used to read about the Gracie challenge, and you read in, like, as you said, that like Terry O'Neill's Fighting Arts was like such a great publication, because it wasn't a comic.
And it was colour.
It was colour. Yeah, that was the other one as well. And it didn't feel like toilet paper in your hands. Yeah. You know, like combat.
Oh, please.
Combat.
I've still got some marks on my fingers.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, you still get the ink off. Yeah, yeah. But it was like it was like, when I first saw the in action, it's just guys fighting on the beach, and then I think it might have been the UFC 1, and it's really funny because I still got it somewhere, and the first ever write-up was by Tony Blauer, you know, from the Spear.
Yeah,
and he did the first write-up for it, and it was funny because he was trying to write it, and he was just going into his foray then of taking martial arts and making it more modern. You know what I mean? Yeah. And as you mentioned earlier about the Budo, Budo nowadays is like trying to navigate the world with the Nokia 3310. It worked really, really well. And the Nokia 3310 era was good. But now we've got smartphones. And when everyone says, yeah, but it doesn't work, and you go, yeah, but we're judging it on the Apple. Yeah. We're not judging it at what it used to be, because it was still good. But yeah, I remember watching it, and I remember it just scared me. And like, honestly, and I got that horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach watching it, because it was just too violent for me. It was too visceral. And I remember doing it. I remember reading like the Tony Blauer thing, then had to go and get a tape because I needed to see what it was like. And then I think it was, you'll remember this, Chris. Do you remember, was it the World Combat or something? World Combat League or something, WCL? And it was like, that was when they were having like Half Gracie and Mad Bastards.
Yeah, it was like a circular cage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that was like...
They were like,
yeah. And they were like the referee wouldn't stop. They'd grab the guy by the ears and start American History Xing the guy through that. And I was like, whoa, I haven't signed up for this. And like, as I said, I never really examined my thoughts on it, but I think that was the genesis of my fear of grappling. Yeah. When I saw that, because I was like, I can't handle that. And then I've said before, I went over and I did one class at Maurizio, when Maurizio was at the custom factory, had the shit kicked out of me. And what I did was, Chris, I was basically like an abuse victim. And I'm not making a joke out of this either. I came out of it and I went, I'm just going to pretend it never happened to me. Because there's two types of people, isn't there? There's people who will fight back. And then there's people who go, well, do you know what? I'm just going to make sure that I avoid any situation that I ever have to be anywhere near something like that again. So that's why I stayed away from grappling.
And then it all changed. You become
complete.
Yeah, black belt.
Yeah, but the only thing is, it was like I had to find the right person. And even though I never really trained extensively with John, being in the gi was unreal. And then like the other guy that I really have to give a lot of thanks to in the beginning was our dear mutual friend Eric Paulson, because Eric is one of those guys that, as you well know, you train with him and it's all laughs and it's jokes and it's fun and it's like mouthpieces in, we're going to spar, and then you just like boom, you're thrown in the deep end. You go, what happened to all these really cool guys I was just hanging out with? Because now they're actually trying to beat the crap out of me.
Next thing they have wide eyes. Take your head off you.
Exactly that. And I've got a great picture of one of my old Facebook profiles where Eric was doing. Do you remember he used to do the crashing cymbals monkey? So what? Yeah. And it's got these two and he's wearing yellow boxing gloves. So it looks like at high speed, it just looks like the Flash or something, right? And he gave me those two. And again, it'd be remiss of me not to mention these two characters: Ewan Campbell, killer, and Mo Coles. And Mo Coles was like that going, because Mo's it was the best thing I've ever seen in martial arts. He goes, because as he hit you, you wanted to drop. And then Eric, being the genius that he is, when he did that, he knew that all they have to do is lift up his arms and then you can't drop. So then he's holding you up while literally you want to, you're like that going, when I go to the toilet, it's going to be red. You know what I mean? I know what's happening. And then bang, bang, box my ears twice and drop me. But yeah, as I said, they were the two guys that got me in, and I could make sure that I had enough fun in it. But like the first time I ever saw it and saw MMA like that, it scared me. It really, really did scare me. So that's going to lead me into, how did you get into grappling if you've been doing all the striking hours?
Yeah. Well, what happened was with the grappling, I watched that same show that you're talking about there. There was a weightlifting gym in Stockton, where all like Dorman and lots of characters were in there. And it came on. I remember it was Conan Silveira was fighting. And if you haven't seen Conan Silveira, like a jacked powerhouse full of tattoos, and he's smashing them up and down with what looked to me like Thai boxing. But then at the end of the fight, he shouted, Jiu-Jitsu, Jiu-Jitsu. And I thought, I want to learn Jiu-Jitsu. It looks like Thai boxing, but it's inside of a cage.
Yeah.
And so I heard there were some people training Jiu-Jitsu, and I went there, and they were like, it was back in the day, they weren't highly skilled or anything. They weren't belted. And I thought, what's this? I thought, this is a total waste of time. I thought, anyone tries to do this on me, I'll smash them. I was lifting heavy. I've been striking plenty of years. I thought, this isn't gonna cut it. So I thought, yeah, Jiu-Jitsu isn't for me. And then what happened one night was, I'd been thrown out of a boxing club. I was training in a pro boxing gym, and the coach was a real disciplinarian, ex-Royal Marine. He'd also boxed at a really good level as a pro, fought for a Commonwealth title. And at that time, I was getting in bits to carry on because, it was to do with that nightclub industry, doors and whatnot. And so he didn't want me in there. And I was like, fair enough. He told somebody to tell me. But then I started going out and like partying and whatnot, and I wasn't living a life that I should have been living. I wanted to get back boxing just to live right more than anything and give it a go. I thought I'm going to give it my best shot. So I thought I'm going to go and ask him if I can carry on training this like months after. So I get in my car, leaving the street, bang, crash my car, couldn't believe it, write my car off. I didn't have any insurance, didn't have a license, so I had to go and pay this person for the car. So then what did I do? Went out drinking. Of course, out drinking in the nightclubs and whatnot. Come out of the nightclub, it was like a summer. So you come out of the nightclub, the fresh air's hitting you. I was like, whoa, suddenly I felt drunk. Walk around the corner in Stockton, there's like a row of pizza shops, and it's always trouble, always. I end up getting into a bit of an altercation with somebody. And next thing, this other man comes around the corner with no neck and cauliflower ears. I thought, oh, look at him. He's coming straight forward at me. Next thing, whoa, I throw a shot, and I'm up in the air. I'm like, whoa, I sort of sobered up for a split second. I thought, grappling works. It works. And I was like, that eureka moment. I was so happy. I was about to get smashed onto the pavement, but I was happy. This was the summer of 2000. So whoomp, I hit the floor, was scuffling about and trying to bite and all that. I didn't know what I was doing down there, like a fish out of the water, as you know what it's like when somebody can grapple and you can't. This man was a world-class wrestler, went on to be Cage Warriors champion, went on to become a good friend of mine, work on the doors together, train together. It got split up, and I was like, whoa, I'm just being smashed in front of all these people. I took my top off, I thought, round two, goes around the pizza shop, kicks the door in to go and find him, starts fighting. Next thing, crack, I'm getting hit with bats. I'm on the floor, and there's all these people trying to hit me with bats, and like a taxi had blocked the back alley off. Leaving me for dead, really. Somehow I fought my way up, I don't know how. Got back round. I said, like, I'll see you tomorrow, shout loads of things. I fought Marty Mandeville, who was a WACO gold medalist. I knew that he knew grappling. He ran all the doors in the area. He was heavily into it. So I contacted him, rang him the next day. I said, having a fight with a wrestler. He's like, son, wrestling's no good. It doesn't work. You need jiu-jitsu. Don't worry. Come and meet me. So he had a gym that was just for him and for his doorman. So I went round there. He taught me a guillotine, taught me a sprawl, a few tiny little things. He was saying, you got to throw a feint, wait for him to come on, told me what he was going to do. This was the Thursday night this little fight happened. Well, big fight, I guess. On the Friday, I learned some techniques. And then the fight was going to be on the Monday. So we met in a car park around the back of it's a boxing club at the weightlifting gym called Natural Progression in Stockton. And so it arranged where I'd take two people. He took two people. When I got there, oh, man, it was absolutely jam-packed full of people. I felt like I was waiting there for an eternity. It was probably about half an hour I was waiting for the guy to come. He comes around the corner, and I thought, wow, was he about to fight him? Look at him, I was sober now. I thought, what am I doing fighting him? So I thought, anyway, come on, let's get to it. And I threw a jab at him with a jab, but I didn't follow up with the right time because, as Marty said, keep your hips back. He shot in. I managed to sprawl it. I didn't get took down. Then nothing much happened in the fight. We just had hold of each other. It was all standing grappling. I was holding on for dear life, to tell you the truth. Then we heard sirens, police coming, all that. We all stopped. And, that was that. So I thought, I'm going to learn this grappling. And I've not stopped training grappling since then, But I went back to Marty. I said, look, this is fantastic. I want to keep on learning. So Marty started coaching me, but we got into a tough sparring session. He wanted to really test me. And I remember going home, I had a migraine. It happened to me before, after boxing. I'm starting to see flashes and whatnot. Went to the hospital. They said, "Oh, it's nothing." I was in severe pain throughout the night, couldn't sleep. Went back the next day, like, "Oh no, you've got a bleed the size of a tennis ball." Ended up, so I was in hospital for 3 weeks, almost died. Got out. I wanted to learn this grappling. I was weak. I'd lost loads and loads of weight. I lost the ability to read. I was like, it was an absolute nightmare, to be honest, back in 2000. Went and seen Marty. He started to coach me again as I was getting stronger. Then he got shot. He went to have a fight with somebody over security. He got shot. So then I ended up on the doors when I'm still weakened, really went on the doors just to try and help out. Got myself back strong again. Marty got out of hospital. Sounds like a crazy story. Marty gets out of the hospital. He's back on the door, really light and everything. He gets his strength back. And then I carry on training. That was really my introduction to grappling. But there was nobody of any note, in the area. The saying, the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Anybody who knew anything was somebody in the grappling world. I think for the first 2 years, I knew an armbar, guillotine, rear naked choke, and a heel hook, and a double wrist lock, Kimura. That was all I knew. And then I saw in a martial arts magazine, Mauricio Gomez teaching a seminar with his son, Hodja Gracie Gomez, at Stevie B's gym in Birmingham. I was like, wow, I've got to go. Yeah, I've got to go to this. I went there. I was getting to learn techniques, didn't have a clue what I was doing. Then we get into roll at the end. I remember getting put in an armbar by somebody who got my arm stuck. I thought, oh, man, this is it. I'm never going to stop learning this. And then I found Gracie Bar at Doncaster, which at the time, that and Gracie Bar Birmingham were the top two clubs. It was Ben Poppleton, Neil Owen, all those guys. And Ben was in Brazil a lot. Neil was in Brazil quite a lot himself. I was saying, I want to go to Brazil. They were just ignoring me, really. I think this guy's going to get killed. Although I added a few of those KSPO contests. I won the KSPO, started winning some Pete and Queen things. Remember all those times? Yeah, that KSPO. Was fun, That was fun.
That was I don't know if my memories.
It was in Nottingham University. It was.
Yeah. Was that anything? Was it Lee Hasdell? Was that was the same time as Rings Rules and all that?
It was around that time, I believe. I think Lee Hasdell was like around that little bit before. Even fought Fyodor, didn't he? Lee Hasdell?
Yeah, he did. Like well, the thing is, I have to stop you because, like, literally, you've just thrown out some names. So, first of all, it's really funny because, like, you can't mention BJJ in the UK without mentioning Ben Poppleton, right? So, for the guys who don't know who he is, you've got to check him out. It's like the big. He's legitimate. So, a really good friend of mine, Paul Cole, little Paul. He looks like that. Yeah. So, Paul was training with me. Well, I should say I was training with him because I was just hanging around with him at Stevie B's downstairs, ACOT Screen.
That was a cool gym, by the way.
That was a great gym. Yeah,
was Stevie B a white Rasta? Was that Stevie B?
What Stevie B's a white Rasta? Yeah, and his wife is jacked, man. She like you people. See her, great people. So he used to do before the Tower Ballroom. Which did you ever go to the Tower Ballroom in Birmingham? No, never. So here's a mad thing. There was in Jeff Thompson's movie Clubbed, we filmed a scene in there for that movie at the Tower Ballroom, and Jeff was saying, "Oh, I don't know if you know where it is," and I went, "Jeff, I've cornered about 20 fights here," and he says, "It's bizarre because it's not a tower, is it?" And he went, "No, it's literally down by an old dodgy reservoir in Birmingham, right? It's like So anywhere in Birmingham was dead sketchy to get to. And Stevie B used to run shows there. And Stevie's white Rasta, I would say Stevie's about 5'4", 5'5", right? His wife's maybe about 5'6", 5'7", but she makes Gabby Garcia look like a hockey mom. Like, she is jacked. She's got shoulders out here and like really, really, I said, good people. And Stevie got to give Stevie his due. He was a visionary. Because Stevie was bit of weight training, a couple of bags up. You know the crack yourself. So the thing is, Chris, I'm not saying anything you don't already know. So in that era, there was two types of people. You mentioned about the one-eyed man being king. So you had guys who were really like, they were considered to be really high-level martial artists. So we have to take guys like Terry O'Neill and that out of the equation. My main instructor, Rick Fale, he says he never really rated a karateka until he met Terry O'Neill. And Terry O'Neill came to meet him at, I think it was Waterloo Station. And when he met him, he literally sidekicked he was like 20 foot away. and he lifted up his leg and did the side kick. And Rick said he covered like 20 foot. It probably was only 10 foot. But he goes, he covered it, boom, and doing it like that. And he said, nice to meet you. And Rick was like, is that how you meet everybody? And obviously then you find out later, it's like one alpha male meets another alpha male. Are we going to be mates here? You know, one of those situations. But you had all of these guys who were high-level martial artists. And then you had guys that were like, Stevie B, if you called him a martial artist, he'd go mad. And the crack is he could bang, he could lift weights. He knew everybody that was worth knowing, like good and bad in the area. And I know for a fact because Maurizio was at the custard factory first and it didn't work out. And then that's when they ended up going. And that was when you'll remember the gym, when it got too big, we went downstairs because upstairs in the little room, there was a hand-painted Gracie Barra sign with a Tasmanian.
I've got that tattoo on my arm.
But I'll tell you what, there's a few of my mates at the moment. I've said to them, I bet you wish you didn't get the big G tattoo now, right? But anyway, that's by the by. But it was like Stevie was a visionary because Stevie was like, I don't really care. It works. I don't care what you call it, but that's it. But it was like, as I said, I had to stop you because it would be really, really remiss as we're chatting away to not mention like the absolute influence that Ben's had. And like the Gordo organization, here's the mad thing, right? A couple of years ago, you saw a couple of guys joining and they were joining Ben. And it was and it still is, it's a very loose association where it's, you come in, you do your own thing. Like, don't talk crap about each other. Like what I like about that organization is, look, we're not going to go down some Mac Dojo route. You know what I mean? You put the badge up there, you got the sign, you know, you look after your own path. But, you know, to me, it seemed more old school, the way I got into martial arts.
That's the way it was with Gracie Barra originally.
Yeah, but that was what Gracie Barra always was. We always
obviously Gordo was one of the top men in Gracie Barra.
He was. And then you mentioned... Ben
who introduced me to him. I used to get privates with Gordo in Brazil. I loved it, man.
I'm going to get you on that part of the story in a minute. And the other guy is, I have to mention it because I don't even have the history with him. But Neil Shrek Owen, right?
Oh, what
a beast, right? And if
I've still got problems with my ribs off his knee, man. I felt like I spent about 5 years getting knee righted by him. He's a monster, he was.
Well, believe it or not, you remember Britain's Got Talent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you remember the two guys who were on it? Strike. So Liam Richards, and Danny. What is Danny's second name? It'll come to it. Danny's a black belt now at Jiu-Jitsu. It's very, very good. But this was a TV show. So it was like America's Got Talent, isn't it? But they were on it, right? So they were on Britain's Got Talent. And me and my wife were watching it. And my wife said, look, you know, especially when they ripped off the shirt and they got the 8-pack and stuff. And Annie said, you do what they do. Why don't you look like they do? And I said, in reality, I forget my hands on any of them too. I'll smash the heads off them, right? And then years later, I'm teaching a seminar up in Sheffield. And Liam, who I was at his wedding, I was one of his ushers. He's a wonderful guy. And he's a really, really good martial artist. He said, I really want to get into jiu-jitsu. And I mean this with the greatest respect. When people say jiu-jitsu is for everybody, everybody should do jiu-jitsu. It's the same as, where Dan Gable says, everyone should wrestle because after that, everything else is easy, right? But jiu-jitsu isn't for everybody. And I said to Liam, I said, look, your lifestyle will just get overtaken by it. And, you know, you've got other business interests going on. It won't be for you. And he said to me, oh, you won't believe it. I'm training. I'm at Doncaster. And he started throwing out names. He goes, you know Neil. And I said, I know who he is. Yeah. He goes, Mick Tully. And I went, dude, you're in a room full of fucking sharks, mate. You don't even realise the room you're in at the moment.
I loved it in there.
Yeah, he kept training. Like, you know, what was it around? What was it? Was there something in the water around Doncaster or around Yorkshire with these guys?
It started off in Body's gym, which was a real old school weightlifting gym. And it was Ben, I think Charlie Martin on a piece of carpet drilling moves. They didn't even have mats. Mick Shaw ended up in there. Neil Owen played for Cass. He was a professional rugby league player, played professional rugby league at 16-year-old. And he was rehabbing an injury. He saw them doing that. He started training with them. Next thing, he just knocked his rugby career on the head. Just started doing jiu-jitsu. He was a phenomenal grappler. For me, back in the day, there was nobody like him in Britain. Like that man he was like a world-class athlete, you know, and he just absolutely loved trained non-stop. He was out in Brazil a lot. Yeah, that was a dangerous man. I remember like 2 months after getting his purple belt, he got a silver in the Pan Ams. He was ridiculously good. Yeah, powerhouse and a great coach as well.
Well, you see, this is the thing, right? So, like, I would definitely like. There's OGs in the BJJ game, and only because I know them. And then people, you've been out for ages. I said, mate, I only got my black belt last year. Mike Beltran was nearly going to beat me. You know what I mean? He was 20 years, but Mike Beltran's moustache didn't help him. You know what I mean? Like, come on. Like you're wearing that moustache, and you know, if that was you or me, Chris, we would be choking him out with that dirty Sanchez. You like that? I'm so sorry, mate. It's got to be legal. But when you see these new guys coming into jiu-jitsu and you try to explain to them that, you know, you can point over to Ben Poppleton or Mark Walder and say they got stripes on their belts from Helio Gracie, and they're like, what? He went, that's the infancy of the art that we're in, right? Because we'll talk about that. So I'd like your thoughts on that, where we're going with especially with jiu-jitsu and stuff, because you're ideally placed for me to ask
another real life legend, Rick Young.
Oh, mate, well, this is the thing. You know, I was a JKD guy, and it was Rick Young. And then, you know, the whole thing with Rick was always the same. Yeah, train intelligently. And then if you knew anything about Rick's history, it was like, oh, I'm not a full-time martial artist. And you're like, but you're Rick Young. No, I'm a postman. Why? Yeah. Keep the two things separate until it came to the point that he had to. He was just too much Rick Young, the martial artist, and not Rick Young just making a living, right? But what I was going to say is I was doing a bit of research earlier, right? So I read this. By the way, we should say, I can't believe I haven't even mentioned this. Guys, you're watching this, you're enjoying this. As you can see, Chris is so funny, and he's such an interesting character. Usually I turn around, you should write a book, but me and Chris know what's coming. We'll talk about that in a bit. But you released an extract of your upcoming book on Facebook, and I swear to God, like Mick Shaw, when I'm reading it, and I'm like, I know these guys. How the fuck do I? Sorry, but I'm like, how do I not know this part of the story? So can you just explain going to Brazil for the first time?
Yeah, crazy times looking back.
Yeah,
it would have been 2003. You know, I started training in Doncaster in April 2003. I remember I broke my hand in an amateur MMA bout, and so I had like whatever it was. I still can't make the fist to this day, but I just took it off so I could train. I wasn't bothered about rehabbing that injury. I had to roll. I was like, wow, this is fantastic. I remember we get smashed. You know, there was about Martin Willoughby and me went first, and then we took 3 carloads of people down to train, and we were the only 2 that kept on going. Some of them were like decent lads, you know, decent grapplers and whatnot, but it was intense. The training was intense, 10-minute rounds until nobody could go, you know, hardcore training. Everybody in that gym in Doncaster was a rough man. You know, they were all fighting men. People weren't really doing jiu-jitsu back in the day for the sake of doing jiu-jitsu. They were fighters. They were like doormen. They all had a story, you know. And also in that gym, it was the old Doncaster Judo Club. Steve Gawthorpe would come on and just go through everybody and kill them stone dead. And I was like, who is that man there? I didn't know he was like a legendary, like Olympic judo player. I was like,
now BJJ.
Yeah. Total.
If there was a guy who didn't need to try and justify himself by getting a belt, Steve Gawthorpe was the man, right?
What a man! Yeah, what a man! And you know, we go there training. Ben's dad Roy was really good with me. He'd pull me aside. He'd teach me non-stop. He was like, I had a private tutor, and they'd pull me aside and teach me. I only actually met Ben once before going out to Brazil. I met him briefly. And the only reason that they let me go to Brazil, because back then it was kind of like, if you knew how to get there, you were part of like an elite club, I guess. You know, they weren't just letting anybody go. And I was from a different town. I used to travel 180-mile round trip to go training there. But what happened was I was asking them to go to Brazil, and they weren't having none of it, really. But then I found out that somebody had been out there to Gracie Bar Ipanema with Marcelo Yogi. I got his email address, started getting in contact with him. I was going to go out there, and I went to the National Submission League. Went to the National Submission League. Neil Owen was there, and he cornered me. And I said, I'm going to Brazil. He said, what do you mean? I told him. He said, look, I'm going back out there. It's okay. Don't go to Ipanema. Come to headquarters, Gracie Barra. He said, just book a flight. Tell me, and I'll have somebody meet you. So I booked it, went to Donny on the Tuesday. He said, right, Ben's going to meet you at the airport. And that was that. I flew out a few days later. I remember I was on the plane. I had like a bag full of fivers and tennis. And I just thought, if this guy's not here, I'm just going to get in a taxi and say, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. I just thought, I've got to find these people. And it was years before, you know, I read Combat Magazine when I was 14. It said the title was Greasy Shujitsu. It was sort of like making fun of jiu-jitsu, saying, oh, look, this is just glorified judo ground fighting. You don't need this. But I thought, no, this is legit. I thought, when I'm a man, I'm going to find this family and I'm going to go and learn from them. And I did. Luckily, Ben was at the airport and, we jumped in the taxi. It was like fantastic just chatting with Ben, and he said, look, you're in the right place. And then that was it. I just hit the ground running, crazy sessions, like 10-minute rounds at the end of morning sessions, evening sessions, just getting smashed completely. Then I started training with Gordo privately. Back then, it was like with an exchange rate, £15 for private lessons with Gordo, world champion. It was fantastic. Wow. I remember taking notes and everything. I come back with a book full of notes, and I started coaching jiu-jitsu as a white belt. Ben said, look, it doesn't matter what color your belt is, start teaching. And I remember I had it packed out. we had the place packed out. People coming and training there. I went out to the Europeans a few months after. That was the first Europeans, was 2004. Managed to win that because I didn't even realize who all these men were. I'd been training with in Brazil. I knew nothing about jiu-jitsu. Like the best of the best are in there. They're all in there on the mat training, like Nino Schembri, just be Sakuraba and Pride.
Wow.
All the best of the best were there. And I was just getting smashed off everybody. But obviously when you're getting smashed, when you're the nail, it starts to rub off on you, doesn't it? And you end up being able to become the hammer yourself, and it was a long, long process. But yeah, I went out there, won that, and then that was it. I was hooked. And just kept on going back out there, coming back, just doing all that I could really to become a better grappler.
Well, you see, this is the thing, right? One of the things that I really liked when I was reading when you were on about it was the fact that you jumped in the back of the taxi and Ben's there and he's just giving out. And the thing is, you mentioned earlier about Doncaster, the Yorkshireman thing, right? Which is something remind me to get back to because it's just as you were saying it, my brain went. But you were saying you're there and you're a kid, you're in the back of the taxi, and there's this guy he's Yorkshire giving out in Portuguese to the taxi driver, having the crack with him, and you're
haggling with him, yeah. I was like,
wow.
and
you're like, wait a minute, this is like something out of a movie.
Yeah,
it was because there's pioneers and there's pioneers. It's like when you were talking about getting over there. It's like I remember, and this will really show my age. Do you remember Connection Rio? Which I think it ended up being a bit like like Hewell Teague's Red Belt DVD. You know what I mean? It's like we won't talk about that. First and only time you try to do a Kickstarter or a GoFundMe in jiu-jitsu, and then it's like, bye-bye, the money's gone. What about that movie we all gave you money for? So anyway, there was Connection Rio. I don't know if you remember that.
I think it was Dennis, wasn't it? I think it was a guy from Alaska that was out in Brazil.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that guy.
And then deposits were taken, and then guys never turned up. And I remember Braulio. I was with Braulio once, and a guy came in and he had a Connection Rio patch on his key, and he goes, "Most expensive patch you ever bought?" And he went, "Yeah." I went, "What's that all about?" He goes, "Oh yeah." He goes, "You sign up. You think you were going to get a holiday, and you didn't get it."
I didn't know about that. I didn't know. But I know people used to go out to the Gracie camp. Most of the gringos.
Yes.
We just went and got on with it ourselves.
Well, it's funny because when you said that, it was like it's very similar to, when, John Will mentioned about, I don't know if you know his story, when he went, he trained with Horian and then he met he met Hegan, and Hegan was like, let's go, no, my friend, stay for another day, come back with me. Because it was like, it was back in those days where you really, if you didn't know somebody, you weren't going to get the invite. And then the other one as well is it was like, the initiation test was very tough. Because it was like, get battered and come back. And again, this is, I didn't think the convo was going to go this way, Chris, but I'd like your thoughts on this. If you look at the timeline of when jiu-jitsu came in, right? Especially, say, if we just take Yorkshire, for instance, right? But, again, Birmingham was a big one. Nottingham, even my brain's firing as I'm thinking this now. It's like all of these towns, especially up north, that had the heart ripped out of them. And you had these guys who were able to define their masculinity by going to work and being grafters. All those industries were taken away. And then 15 years later, these blokes, kids are growing up. And so where's my outlet? Where am I, how do I define myself as a man? Because, as we said earlier, we come from that generation where, you have a scrap. It's so funny now because people go, well, what do you do? I say, I'll just take them around the corner and tune them up. And they'd be like, yeah, but someone will film it. And I'm sorry, mate. It's been that long. I don't really care. Maybe a highlight reel. But the thing is, we're from that generation where it's like, and Yeah, well, I'll call the police. Yeah, but I'll get what I need to do right now.
That never used to be a thing, did it?
No, of course it didn't. It was like you started the fight, mate. It didn't work out for you. That's it. And it is like, do you think there was a sort of correlation between that? Or do you think it's just up north? It's that like life is rough.
Yeah, I think the deprived areas, for instance, where my academy is in Stockton, per capita, it's the worst place in the country to live. Early deaths, more children in care, more unemployment. The drug rates are off the charts, and because it was once, a hustling Teesside was an industrial area. We had the steelworks, and bit by bit, it all got taken from us. And it just became a hotbed for crime. And I think the full north of England was like that, wasn't it? With what they did with the miners and everything as well in the Donny area. Yeah, and I think people needed an outlet, and I really think that martial arts are the outlet for many people, 100%.
But you see, this is the thing, and we won't go because we could go deep on this. But it's the whole thing where young guys today are now looking at Andrew Tate, and they're going, this is what the definition of masculinity and stuff. And they're like, okay, he looks good. I've seen a couple of his fights. He looks like he could have a rock. But like, as soon as he turned around and said jiu-jitsu won't work, I just was straight away, I went pussy. Immediately, as soon as I did that, I go, we both know that it works, mate. That's why you're 100%. Saying it. Yeah. No matter how many bodyguards you've got, mate, I'll be able to get hold of you. But like the thing is, that's why I think so, especially MMA and BJJ has had this massive explosion, because like you're allowed to come on, mate. It can't be any more toxic than me riding another human being and going, hey, you think it's going to get worse? Yeah. And it's like, sorry, mate, this is I don't even want to say toxic masculinity, because most of my best teachers in jiu-jitsu are women. You know what I mean? I think there's just something visceral about it where it's like, just don't be weak. Try and talk your way out of it. Sorry, mate, I know more people in the army than I do as diplomats. So guess what? It looks like diplomacy doesn't work. Looks like force does. But anyway, I could go down a mad philosophical stoic point here, so I'm not going to bore you with that, Chris. But if we can go on to now, when you first hit my radar, you were starting to do some training with Jeff Thompson, right? And I'm guessing this timeline's after you've already, like, what are we saying, like 2009, 2008?
Yeah, 2010. I just come back from my honeymoon, which was in Brazil. I went out there and I did a little bit of Gracie Holmaita, Hoyle Gracie's academy. And I remember I'd had a bad injury in 2005. I was training for the Mundials. Everything was going great. And I got an injury, dislocated disc in my lower back, and then I injured them more in a fight. And the doctor said, look, you're never going to train again. I remember looking at me and I said, I fucking will. I thought, I'll train again. Within a year, I fought pro MMA, which I probably rushed it, but I had to do it. I knew within a year I had to fight. And Middlesbrough Football Club's physio team were fantastic with me, and they got me back right. But then after, I think, 2 months back on the mat, then I had a grade 2 tear, my pec, delt, and bicep, rolling with big Phil DeFries. So I was out for another 8 months. So in 2 years, I was nearly out completely. I was getting myself back right again. I had a couple more MMA bouts, back training, but I couldn't train as I was training before. And then when I went out to Brazil, a flare up again of that issue, with my lower back, and I just thought, this is it. I thought, I'm old now, which looking back, I was very young, compared to now. I thought, this is it. I'm going to have to just knock martial arts on the head. I had a security company. I already planned on knocking that on the head. And I went up with Christ the Redeemer, and I said a prayer. I said, God, give me another chance. Give me another chance with this martial arts. I'm changing my life. And then I'd already signed up to Jeff Thompson's masterclass, which was the back end of January. It was a 6-month masterclass. Went on that, got better, just got filled with like positivity and whatnot, being around men like Jeff, Al Peasland, Tony, Matty, all those guys. I was like, yeah, I'm in the room full of good people they've been there and done it as well, and I gave up my old life, and I just started off on a new journey, really. It's a cliche, but it really was. I just put everything else behind me and I carried on. It wasn't easy. There was ups and downs, but I just kept on going.
Well, it's so funny you said that, because when Al told me, me and Al taught a couple of times on masterclasses. The first couple was 6 months.
I was going to join your masterclass. I remember
you were
as well. Yeah,
you were. And we were doing some training, and I said to him as well. And this is I'm not denigrating anyone that was on it. So some pretty good high level guys there. And Al says to me, he goes, "Yeah, we've got this guy. He's a wicked grappler, Chris Crossan." And I went, "Chris Crossan, right?" I said, "No, you're not talking about the two black kids wearing the clothes back to front. Yeah, that's a reference for anyone under 35 hasn't got that. Google it. Go on YouTube. You won't believe that actually That was a pop
Jump.
thing. Jump, yeah. And I said, are you on about the guy from up north? I said, he's around Doncaster, Darlington way. And like the problem is, when you're from down south, you're like that guy.
Everywhere's Newcastle, isn't it?
Everywhere. It's like that guy. But where's he from? Oh, he's somewhere around there. Darlington. Yeah. It's 200 mile round trip. But anyway, I was like, wow. And Al goes, Mick, you went quiet and you never go quiet. And I went, he's on that. And he went, yeah. And I said, is he teaching on that? He goes, oh, no, he's coming up as a student. I went, you boys are good. Be prepared. And he went, what? I said, mate, he's going to blow your mind. And he said, what? I said, well, a few of those guys on that course think they are. That's what he is. And they were like, really? And I said, mate, I've had loads of people tell me. And you see, the thing is, I've been following the MMA scene for years, right? So it's like you threw out a name there, Big Phil, right? So Big Phil DeFries is like, this guy he's been a heavyweight champion. They
need to make him the king of Poland, don't they?
Yeah.
I think he's defended that belt 15 times. He's beat the roughest men of the roughest men in Poland.
Mate, he's had guys
and top Americans. The men he's smashing is unbelievable.
And he's like, if I need to get Phil. I want to get him do an interview with him. So he's held the title for 10 years.
Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah, and so he's a rock star in Poland, and then it's mad because he's popping up every now and again on my social media, drinking pints of beer and stuff like that. And, it was, thank God that training camp's over.
Nice man as well.
Yeah.
He's Tom Aspinall's #1 trainer right now.
Yeah, but you see, this is what I was going to say. It came on the TV and then I'm like, what's Phil doing? How come he's with Aspinall? And then, so I think, I don't know, I've never told you this. Do you remember Cage Warriors back in the day?
Of course, yeah.
So do you remember... Yeah, do you remember Andy Lillis, who used to own it? Andy Lillis, Dean Griffiths, and there was a guy, was it Dougie Freeman?
Dougie Freeman was like some sort of porn director or something, wasn't it?
It was just some, yeah.
Some of those shows were wild.
This...
I was in Coventry, didn't there, as well? We've been to Coventry, the shows.
Barrington...
There was a riot to that one, wasn't there?
Yeah, I was there. I was ringside there. As I said before, it's like, when you talk about old school MMA, like Neil McLeod, you remember Neil McLeod, right?
Yeah.
So Neil McLeod had a trilogy, the best trilogy I've ever seen, right? Against Paul McVeigh from Dinky Ninjas up in Glasgow.
Yeah, rough man.
Yeah, and it was the last fight, and Mark Goddard was refereeing it. He'd already had to throw a guy out. We had a streaker.
He was like a doorman as well.
He was, yeah. You'll see it on YouTube. The guy who was there and he had like the tracky bottoms with the poppers down the side, and he'd just gone down, whipped his pants off, had no clothes on. And then Mark was there. Mark was like, it says afterwards, he was going to go for like a high crotch or something to lift him. He go, I'm going to be,
he's a big rough man, Mark.
Man, he's a tough old man, right? Yeah,
I had 2 matches with Mark, one without the gi and one with the gi.
Yeah, how did that go?
Good, Well, in the one was in the submission league. It was where it went the distance. It was a draw, but I definitely I didn't know what I was doing. I went the distance.
Really?
And then in the second one, I just come back from Brazil, and obviously I was working on my gi game, so I was on form then. I won the Gracie Invitational that day. I beat everybody by submission. Yeah, I was. I was on fire then.
Well, I was going to say,
Mark was the main man. He was the top no-gi guy in the country, I believe.
I think Mark at the time. If Mark had gone into it, Mark would have easily.
He almost beat Jeff Monson, didn't he? Remember
he
that?
did.
That stuck right into him.
Yeah, he did. Well, the thing was, I mentioned, like, God rest his soul, Barrington Patterson was a good mate of mine. If you guys
I saw them sparring once on YouTube.
They did it on TV, didn't they? Because Baz was it was Kate Cray doing the Hard Bastards TV show, and they did it over. I think it might have been actually at Acox Green, and they did it all like brought the roller shutter down on it, and it was Barrington was getting ready for a fight, an MMA fight. And like I said, the fight where the riot kicked off, Barrington went up against this big French dude. And I was ringside and I was surrounded by, some of them were okay, but the usual local scrotes and that. And they're, Barrington's going to kill him. And this French guy has no idea who Barrington is, mate. And he was like, yeah, but it's Barrington. And I went, that's one big, huge French Algerian going up against another big black dude. They won't care. He doesn't care about the reputation. They'll find out. And as I recall it, Barrington turtled up, and I think he went like side back control, and he just went 12-6 on the back of his head twice with an elbow. And that was when Bisping, the same night, Bisping was fighting a guy, and he just made it in the UFC. on the Ultimate Fighter show. And I think he had one more fight to do, Mike did. And it ended up, first of all, it was going to be a Muay Thai fight in the cage because Mike had picked up an injury, so he didn't want to do MMA. And then it became a cage kickboxing match.
Was Cyril DiBiase, was it?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And as soon as he threw that first elbow, and the referee was like, and I was like, Mike's made the best choice ever for this. But what I was going to say was I went to quite a few of those Cage Warriors shows. I was sitting down with you remember Ross Pearson, don't you?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
one of my lads fought him. Ross is from Sunderland. He was one of Ian Freeman's lads to begin with. He was
he was down there, and it was actually on the table like that. That was makes me sad. Like I don't know why I was even there. Like me and Andy Lillis, we had our first ever karate class together at 16, and I'd always stuck with it. And then when he got into Cage Warriors, he was telling me, it's a great business opportunity, and he was into all sorts of murky stuff. Like let's put it this way, he's not going to see Christmas for 30 years. Like, so that's where he is now. And I like Andy, he's a sound lad. But he was saying to me, he goes, this is a great thing. And I went, get out of all of your dodginess. Because I was sitting ringside and there was me, Ian Freeman, Dan Hardy, Ross Poynton, and then do you remember Colin Fletcher?
Yeah, Freak Show.
Yeah. So Freak Show was there. And they're all around your neck of the woods, are they? Or how far away?
Yeah, well, it's crazy. The first time I heard about cage fighting, I was at a nightclub called Tall Trees. It was the top nightclub in the North. This would have been like 1999, 98. There was a big man, like dancing about on his own. It was like thousands of people in there. Like there was just nobody near. And I said, when who's that there? Who's that man with the bald head? Someone said, that's Ian Freeman. He's a cage fighter. I remember thinking, cage fighter? I thought, whatever in the world. I was thinking cage. I was like, I remember like this thing. I didn't even know what it was, and that was because Ian was in there, and he had a real presence about him. As you can imagine, he'd already been fighting in the UFC about then, I think.
Yeah.
Made his debut.
Well, I've told a few people I was at the brawl at the Albert Hall.
Josh Barnett in his corner.
Yeah. So he fought Mia. And then it was Josh Barnett was there, and that was where Matt Hughes and Carlos Newton.
Yeah, where him in the triangle and he slammed it.
Yeah. One was getting choked out, and the other one was about to get his neck broken. Yeah, but like
Lee Remedios fought in it, didn't he? As well.
Lee Remedios fought in it. He's still going strong now. He's just got. I don't want to say recently, but the last 2 or 3 years, I think he got his black belt at BJJ.
Yeah, I think he's on with Jiu-Jitsu now. He used to fight like no rules, like flying out to Eastern Europe, fight anybody, any rule set.
He just didn't care less. He didn't care less, and a proper martial artist and a very smart kid as well. Yeah. A very smart kid. Like if you look at that era, so look at there was Lee Remedios. Rosie Sexton was around at that time as well.
Carl Tanswell, God rest his soul.
Yeah. Carl was a real pioneer. I think because he was obviously you had Rick Young get straight into BJJ, and then Carl was one of the first JKD guys because the first time we met, I've said it before, we didn't get on very well the first time we met. Because he was going, you still swing the sticks and do all those dead drills and that. And I went, mate, if you change your accent, you're going to sound exactly like who you want to sound like. And he went, who? And I went, he's 6'10", he's a black belt, he's got a gym called Straight Blast. And he was like, what are you on about? And it is funny because it showed a bit of ignorance on my side, a little bit of ignorance on his side, because I was still looking at it as an art form, right? And the one thing you've got to give the Straight Blast boys is they looked at Jeet Kune Do and they went, right, okay, but most of you guys are just cosplaying.
They were all about testing it, weren't they?
They were all about testing it. And the thing is, that me and you now are both in a stage in our life where if the guy's there and he's cosplaying it, but it makes him feel good about himself, it makes him a better husband to his wife, a better father to his kids, a better citizen, better part of the community, great. The only time I have an issue with any of it is when you turn around and go, it works for real. And
they start teaching it as self-defense.
Yeah. So don't go down that route because someone will rely on that, mate. And when it doesn't happen, it's really, really going to get to you. Now, if you don't mind, and now this is strictly really, it's quite indulgent of me, really, because it's a question I've always wanted to ask you. But the beauty of doing stuff like this is I can ask questions without being rude and say, but my listeners need to understand, right? So it's with you. I knew about your past and what you've been up to and everything like that, and I know the man that you are today, right? So did you have a road to Damascus moment like when you accepted Jesus, because your faith's huge. After Eric Paulson, I don't think I know. Well, no, I know Rick Young as well, because I know that faith is really important to Rick. But Rick, the way he addresses it is like, if you ask, we'll speak about it. But I'm not going to be evangelical. I'm not going to preach it. Whereas both yourself and Eric will turn around and just go, right, you can take the Mickey out of me if you want, but this is what I am. Like, when you actually a true, and I don't mean in any bad way, when you're a true believer and you go, well, I'm going to tell you whether or not, Jesus will change your life. And so how did it happen to you?
So I always knew God, really, to be honest. When I was a kid, I remember I'd pray for hours on my own. I just pray all the time. It seemed that I was born with a crazy faith, and that faith kind of left me at a very stage in my life. But then when I was like 13 years old, I remember getting given a Gideon's Bible at school, and I read it all. I remember thinking I've got to start living properly. I was trying to do what the Bible said was right. But then obviously as things went on, I become anything but that person. I was like the opposite, to tell you the truth. But then I remember once, when I was about 21, 22, I was on the run. I was in Tenerife. I'd had an altercation. I didn't know if someone was good. I thought they were brown bread, to be honest. I thought, oh no, I've ruined my life and this, that and the other. And, I was there, and I remember buying a picture of Jesus that was on the market, and I remember praying, and the guy that was there, there was a guy that popped up who I knew in Tenerife, of all places. I started speaking to him, and he seemed to know everything about Jesus, but you won't think it because, he was an armed robber and whatnot. He wasn't that type of man. But I found out that, his ex-wife, her dad was a pastor, and he really poured all this stuff into him that he didn't listen to, but luckily he passed it on to me. He said I had the answer to everything, and I came back home, really tried to live a better life, really, really did try. And it was just tough. I just seemed to always get dragged back into that old world, that old environment. Probably, they say you're a product of your environment, and I lived in a place where it was really, really hard to walk that narrow path. I'd tried time and time again. I'd fall short. And then I remember, Rick Young, you mentioned Rick Young. I remember hearing that he was a Christian. I used to love reading his column in the magazines and whatnot. I heard that he didn't compete on a Sunday because he went to church. I remember thinking, wow, that's amazing, And then when I was out in Brazil, I remember when I'd be on the mats, I'd always feel peace, total peace in Brazil more than anywhere. And a lot of those guys were Christians. They said, Fica com Deus, be with Jesus, it's all about Jesus, God, and all this and that. And I didn't know this is something called the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Wind. And I felt so good. And Legato, I'd spent a lot of time with Legato. I trained privately with him. We brought him over on his first trip, and some funny stories there. And, he'd tell me that he believed in Jesus as well. And one time I was going past a church, this is how dark and how messed up I must have been. There was a man outside the church. He was dressed in a Santa outfit with a puppet. I said, let's go and talk to this man. But I was making out as if I thought it was funny, but I really wanted to go in that church. I really wanted to change my life. And we went in there, and the man started telling me about Jesus, about God and all this. Lovely, lovely man. And this is terrible looking back. This is, I'll share it anyway because it was a long time ago. This has been about 2004. I just got back from a trip to Brazil. I remember as he's speaking all this nice stuff. I remember just it's like as if I heard a voice saying, knock him out. He's lying to you. I thought, oh no, I'm going to hit the priest, so whoever he is in the church. I couldn't believe it. And I felt my fist going to clench. I thought, no, it was like there was a spiritual fight going on. And then it's terrible to say this because me now, there's not a chance, And then an old lady popped up. She was like an angel. She gave me a mince pie and then a drink in the other hand. And I thought, wow, she'd give me this in my hands. And I don't think I would have done that, but there was something, it was as if there was something going to make me do it, which is terrible, Stuart, the guy, lovely man, ended up becoming really close to him. Started going to church, really trying all that I could to do well. Started having a lot of success, competitions and everything. I felt like I was really living right. And then when I walked away from it, it's as if, I don't know, it's as if I was blessed in a bad way. It was just like everything I touched turned to gold, but I wasn't living right, if that makes sense. It wasn't good at all. And I started getting terrible injuries, misfortune, bad luck. It just wasn't good. And then it got to a few years past that point, would have been, I think, 2008 or 2009 maybe. There was a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, was in prison, and he read a book by Graham Seed called One Step Beyond. I'd heard of Graham. He was an ex-football hooligan, big, rough, tough man, 6'6", giant of a man. And then he'd end up being a tramp living on the street and then whatnot after getting out of jail. And then he was living on a bench. These Christians were coming and speaking to him. He was chasing them, saying he didn't want to speak to them, but they had chocolate. He was like, "Oh, I'll talk to these." Give him chocolate. They give him a drink, and he let them pray for him. One night they went and Graham wasn't there, and they found that he was in hospital. So they went to the hospital, and his mum was about to sign the thing to turn off his life support machine. And they said, "Can we pray for him?" She said, "Look, what's the point?" They said, "Please." They prayed. He woke up. But he didn't want to be a Christian. He was like, no, it's boring. I don't want to be that. But he didn't want to drink anymore. Didn't want to take drugs anymore. And then he just changed his life completely. And now you fast forward about 30 years, total different man. He works in schools. He's been around all the prisons preaching. His book was Christian Book of the Year. He's brought lots and lots of people to live in a different way. He's like an angel now. Whereas before he was like a big, scary football hooligan, scars on his face, fingers chopped off, head to toe and tattoos and whatnot. And Matt, my friend Matt, I say Matt Howard, good friend of mine. I used to coach him. He became a good MMA fighter. Ended up out at the rough house. He did, Matt, but he was in prison at the time. And he said, "You got to read this book." He's a traveling man, never read a book in his life. He read it in one go. He said, "I could read it, no problem." He said, "You got to find it." So I was looking for it everywhere, couldn't find it. I started asking people that's in because some of the lads are in the Cat D where they come out on a weekend. I know Graham was in there as well, so I mentioned it to the lads. Anyway, something happened, and I was going to deal with a situation where I'd have probably still been in prison now if it had happened. It was a nonce. I was going to deal with something, and I rang Graham the day before and just went to Antiphon. I said, "Look," told him who it was. I said, "I've read your book because I managed somebody give me the book out of the prison." And I said, "I heard a voice in my head saying to ring him." Now, I put the phone down. I thought, he's never going to answer. He's never going to contact me. He's going to think I'm hearing voices. That's twice I've mentioned hearing voices within the last couple of minutes.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, I forgot all about it. Anyway, I'm outside this place looking for this guy and all that. The phone rings, and the guy wasn't there. The phone rings, and it's him. It's Graham. I just open up totally. I wouldn't normally speak on the phone. I said, "Look, I might as well tell you this is what's going to happen." I just emptied. He knew of me and knew about me at that time. And I said, "I just don't know who's going to pick my son up from school," because my son was in nursery. I was a single dad at the time as well. I had a daughter and a son, little kids. He said to me, "Well, you must not be a bad man." He said, "Because Jesus says, after loving the Lord your God with all your heart, you've got to love your family. So you're a good man." I remember thinking, "Well, I must be good." I was like, he got me there. He said, "Will you come and meet me tomorrow?" I said, "Yeah, definitely." So I went and met him, 9 o'clock in the morning. I was chatting with him till 2:30. We were just chatting non-stop. And he gave me a book by Nicky Cruz, who was the leader of the Mau Mau's in New York, violent gangster. Changed his life, became a Christian. I remember thinking, well, if he can change, surely I can change. And I started meeting Graham, going to church, prayer meetings and all this and that. Well, I went to a prayer meeting the day after, actually. My wife, now she invited me to a prayer meeting. I went there and I started feeling like really, really good. But at first, like, what am I doing here? I should be around all these nice people. And I thought people in church were posh. I thought they're just like posh people. It's not for what I thought was normal people. And then I started praying, just got filled with like the Holy Spirit. And really, from that point on, I've never been able to go back to my old life. Even at times I've wanted to. I've thought about it. It's just like, it's impossible for that to happen, and, thank God.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Graham, because one of the pictures that you put up on Facebook is where you both baptised your son, Hickson.
Baptised quite
at the same time.
Yeah. And that's the son that was at nursery who I thought I was going to have to leave because I was going to be locked up.
This is the thing. It's like, it's mad because, again, we're from a different generation. Maybe we're a little bit more idealistic. It's like you were saying there, just as you were saying, as you were speaking, it was like for the guys, especially the American guys who are listening, when you mentioned the nonce, right, that's a pedophile, right? And it's one of those things where it's like nowadays, it's like, well, I'll just tell the police. But we're from that generation where it's like, no, we'll just go and fill them in. And it's like, as you were saying it, it's that, it was funny because you put a few things where you said that, first of all, you saw Jiu-Jitsu, I'm going to do Jiu-Jitsu. Then you watched Choke with Hickson Gracie, and you said, if I'm going to have a son, I'm going to call him what? Hickson, right?
Yeah, Hickson.
Right? and then the mad thing is, you try to say that to someone, and maybe I've thought about this a lot recently as I'm getting older. Am I more sentimental, or am I just getting a little bit Yeah, well, I just look at stuff and go, well, actually, no, it isn't cliche. It's just a really lovely thing, because if you think about it, right, it's funny. You say it to some people, go, so your son's name Hickson after what? And, after Hickson Gracie. Who's he? Well, basically the greatest of all time. And because it is funny, because it's like so many religions, we did it for years in religion. Yeah, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There was a reason. No, but it's true, though, right? So I'll tell you now, and it's mad, because this isn't where I thought our conversation was going to go. But it's like with me, Michael, Hugh, Francis, right? I always
proper
Michael, Hugh, Francis. I always say Aloysius as well. I only do Aloysius because that actually is in homage to Shane McGowan. So Shane McGowan, he could, you talk about living life. You know what I mean? He might not have made all the right decisions, but guess what? That's a hell of a biopic if you ever go and see him, right? But there was a Michael, why? And I spoke to Eric Paulson about this, and he said, we were talking about names and stuff, and obviously with Eric, it's with a K. Why? Well, have you ever been to Minneapolis? You ever been to Minnesota? I think he's Coon Rabbits is where he's from.
Viking territory.
Yeah. That's why you're going to be called that Paul Son. You get that. So there's a real the etymology of a person's name should be really, really important. And it's like with me. So Michael, who was he? Well, you think about Hickson Gracie being an angel, mate. Like, so who is he? He was a top guy he was a guy that God sent down to fight the devil, man. It wasn't Gabriel, was it? Yeah, it wasn't any of the seraphim, it wasn't any of them boys. It was like, do you know what?
He's still fighting for us now.
Yeah, it's like, we'll get Michael to do that. Hugh, named after my grandfather, right? And then obviously my other grandfather was Michael as well. And then Francis was the one that I chose for my confirmation. And why? Because he's patron saint of animals. Because, we were off camera there. I was saying to Will about being middle child. I've always had more affinity to animals than most humans. As I always say, I've never, ever, ever second guessed the dog's opinion on a human being, right? But as soon as I see a human being that won't pet a dog, I know everything about that guy. You know what I mean? I can tell you everything. But it's the thing that, like, naming your son Hickson, I was thinking about it today, because it was like, it was number one on the list of things that you said you were going to do, right? So even then, like, even before you were thinking about, I'm just going to use jiu-jitsu to smash other people, I'm like, well, do you know what? It's a pretty good head start if I'm going to give a kid. And it's a bit like, it's almost like a play on the boy named Sue with Johnny Cash. It's like,
I was just going to say that,
really?
Exactly that. When he's a kid getting so many fights of kids who do jiu-jitsu, so they all want to test themselves and fight. So.
Well, yeah, but what a great name to have to grow into. Because sometimes that's what you have to do. It is mad. So this is leading me on nicely now to, I only know, oh, by the way, belated birthday greetings for yesterday, mate.
Thank you very much.
New Year's Day, man. Great. Sorry, Chris, we haven't got any money for your birthday, but yeah, we had a good crack last night. We have a good crack every night before my birthday, mate. It's New Year's Eve. But no, belated for that. But I noticed that you've been doing something like part of the outreach program that you do, and it's not just that give it. Loads of guys give out free lessons. I give out free lessons all the time, but like the feeding the community and some of the dare I say it, it's like biblical sort of stuff that you're doing here. Putting
it's
food.
A blessing to be able to do. We love it. Yeah, we love it.
Yeah, can you explain what you do?
Yes, it's been going on now for, I think it was the summer before lockdown. I think. Yeah, my younger son Caesar, he was playing football for a local team. It was in an area where it's a really deprived area, lots of refugees, lots of African refugees, and my wife had him over at training. So practice would have been like 5:30, 6 o'clock, and there was a little kid from Africa, and he said he was hungry, and he asked the other kids, did anybody else ate today? None of them had. It was a summer holidays. My wife come home crying her eyes out, and she said, we're going to have to do something. And I said, look, let's set up a class tomorrow, let's say free training, and we give food just so, it's an excuse to get them in there. And so we just told the football team, and it's funny because that football team, Primrose Hill, that's how we started our kids program as well, because we had two young lads, Flash and Dash, and that was a great story because they come train. The granddad brought them when they were 12 because they were getting into loads of fights and whatnot. Wild two twins, and now fast forward to now, they both got degrees. One of them's married to a pastor's daughter in America. The other one's doing really well here, and they brought the kids to our first to have classes, So again, it was Primrose Hill football team that sent these kids over, and then we just kept on doing it. We'd be getting bits of food together. Grandma and his wife would be buying food. Heidi and me and my wife would be buying food. And fast forward to now, because it's got bigger and bigger, we get it all funded. We're getting all the food paid for. We're getting like donations from all different shops and whatnot. And now we have 2 locations where, like, in the summer holidays or any holidays, kids that are off school that can come, they can train and then get a hot meal. So it's absolutely fantastic. We love it. And we've also managed to give out 120 gift packs to kids as well over the Christmas holidays. So it's been we're still on with it now, actually. We have Friday, tomorrow and Saturday, and that's the end of it for this holiday. But yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. We love it. And any kids that do well, we give them scholarships. And then we carry that on. They get free training, entry into competitions and whatnot. But New Year's Eve, we had a tournament. We did like in-house tournament for juniors and adults. It was fantastic afterwards. All the families are there, and we're having food with them and whatnot. I just thought this is what martial arts is about for me now. There's kids from all different backgrounds, nationalities. We're calling them halal dogs because obviously a lot of them are Muslims, not allowed to eat certain meat. So we made the hot dogs made out of turkey, and they're just so happy, big smiles on their face that somebody actually cares to really look into how they live. And just, it says in the Bible as well, if anything offends anybody on your plate, don't eat it. And it says in the Bible not to eat pig as well. That's a conversation for another day. Yeah, but it's all in there. Some people don't choose to do it, and that's okay. I think we have choice. But if you look at it, the pig, it's an animal that's dirty. It's not. If you look in bodybuilding diets, no one's saying eat the pig. It's so good for you. It eats terrible things. It'll eat anything you put in front of it. So yeah. So I don't eat the pig anyway. I've fasted it for a long time, and I feel a lot better. Don't eat the pig.
Don't eat the pig. Well, you see, this is the thing. Just as you were saying it again, my brain's going off in all directions. I can't even remember who said it. It's a great line. The perfect antidote to ignorance is travel, right? So it's like, if you go places, you can't be ignorant because you're just seeing different stuff. And then as you were saying it about martial arts, it's really and I'm really
mentioning animals, Mick. Look, there's one kid.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. Now that's it. I love that. Love the dog, man. It's very, very hard to hate somebody when you know them. It's like without getting really, really out there. The first step to any abuse is to dehumanize somebody else. So when you can always tell when a relationship's going bad when they go, "Oh, that man came back late last night," and you're like, "Him, that creature." And you go, "Do you know what you're doing?" Well, you're doing all this because guess what? Your subconscious won't allow you to hurt. We're not designed to be hateful specimens. We're just not. But we've allowed ourselves to get in. It was like you saying about, my sister's a Muslim revert, right? So there's a lot of stuff that we disagree on, but it's her choice. But then there's certain parts of her religion that I totally get, which is, first of all, eating pig. Yeah, bacon tastes good. Yeah, but nearly everything that tastes good for me is bad for me.
Sin always tastes good.
Yeah, Cinnabon tastes good, right? Always tastes good. That isn't good for me. And then when that was actually a really, really important thing, it was like what you were saying. It's, let's not get into it, but unfortunately, I'll get into it a little bit. It's like, where you look at John Jones, right? So John Jones is a martial artist. He's amazing, right? And he's got this Philippians tattoo across his chest, and he's
Philippians 1:7, I think.
Yeah. And I'm like this. I believe in the redemption for everybody, but then there's a point where if you keep doing it, now it's just a habit, and that's who you are. Your habits will show me your true nature. But so it's the reason I'm saying that is when the pig thing was a big thing, there was a lot of stuff in like Leviticus, which was like just basically common sense. Don't eat shellfish. Why? Because you probably are not going to cook it right. You might die. Not with that. No. Oh, well, I'll take a risk. Why? Because human nature is to take a risk. So what do? Go, don't eat the shellfish. You will die. And then it's like, don't eat the pig. Don't eat the pig. Why not? Because you'll take on the characteristics of the pig. We both know you're not going to take on the characteristics of the pig. Who knows? You might do. You are a product of your environment. Who knows? But it was like there's certain things like that. Like the one thing that I've always admired when it comes to Islam is the fact that Prophet Muhammad never wanted his picture anywhere, right? Because first of all, he didn't want to like Martin Luther. If you want, like when people start going crazy, I'm a bit evangelical about stuff like this, being a lapsed Catholic, right? So it was like Martin Luther was really smart because he was going, right, so people are dying, but we've got all these golden statues here, and like we're praying to a statue when we shouldn't really be doing that. Like, doesn't it say in the Bible, we shouldn't have been doing this? There was a big kickoff in. There was a big
pictures
kickoff.
of white Jesus and everything. It's terrible. It's not
all of that. Yeah, all of that. And then the more I've read into it, especially with Islam, it was because they know that your head will go on a coin, and that will put value on that coin, which will eventually devalue you, because it's like that's just how it works. And so I look at the crazy thing about, if we take the Bible for instance, right? It's such a big book. You can find anything in there that's good, and you can find pretty much anything in there that's bad to justify your bad behavior, because it's just so big. You know what I mean? Especially when you consider
the bibliography, isn't it? That's what it is. It's the Bible, isn't it? It's the library of books.
Hey, well, you know yourself. It's like, what's like, Chris, what's some really important stuff? The really important stuff is the tenets that everyone else believes in. Treat everyone the way you want it to be treated. If you can do good, do good, but just don't do harm. Like that's,
if everybody lived like that, we'd be good, wouldn't we?
Yeah. You don't have to be a saint. You know what I mean? It's like, it's one of my favorite scenes of all time, and it'll bring us on to another thing now, which is, you ever seen the movie The Count of Monte Cristo?
No.
Oh, it's unbelievable! It's a great movie. Well, the old movie's really good, but the latest one, you'd love it. It's got Jim Caviezel. You know the actor. You ever?
I don't watch much movies.
Mate, I'll get you it.
Very rare.
So he was the guy who played Jesus in The Passion of the Christ. And at the moment, he's sort of being a bit cancelled because just talking about stuff that people don't want to talk about. And like, we won't touch on any of that. But in this movie, he plays the Count of Monte Cristo, and he's there up against, was it Guy Pearce? The guy who used to be in Neighbours. And he plays the baddie, right? So he plays the baddie. Jim Caviezel plays the goodie. So you like the Count of Monte Cristo story is unbelievable. He's been imprisoned with no justification whatsoever, and then it's a true story of redemption, a true story of changing who you are as a person, but having a mentor figure, all of that. But the reason I said the whole thing is there's a bit at the end where they get down to it and they have this proper knuckle, massive fight, goes like that, and then Guy Pearce turns around and he pulls the ace card out of the bag because he knows he's going to get killed, right? So like he had no worries about killing other people. But then when it came to him, oh, no, I'm going to appeal to your better nature. So he goes, oh, for all of your posturing, for all of the things you say that you're a good man, and now you're going to kill me in cold blood. And he just turns around, he goes, whoosh, and he just runs through him. And he turns around, he goes, I said I was a count. I never said I was a saint. And it's such a great line because it's that whole understanding who you are. And then just living with it, which is going to bring me into where I'd like to take us to, right? So, if I'm maybe so bold to say that you started off as more than if Guy Ritchie was ever going to do a movie up north, like you'd be a character in it, right? You had a colourful past, right? To where you are now, which is a complete and utter 180. And I've said this before about you, Chris. You're literally one of the only people that I actually know that talks the talk and walks the walk, because everyone else sees the highlight reel of the good acts every now and again. You know, the guy who goes out and gives the homeless man the sandwich, but films himself doing it, right? And you're the complete opposite. To find out half of the stuff that you did, I had to dig pretty deep, mate. You know what I mean? To find it. So where do you think your life, Chris Crossan, the future, where's it taking you?
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? I just think that I'm blessed to be here now. Totally blessed, because I didn't think I'd get out of my 20s, to be honest, and I didn't want to tell you the truth. I think I would I'd have never took my own life, but I was quite happy with someone else to do it. That was the mindset that I had back then. I was wild. I was out of control. But then I remember being in hospital one time, and it was like my life was slipping away, and I wanted to live suddenly. I thought I wanted to live, and like when you stare death in the face, it's different. Even when I was 17, I had a situation where somebody ran me over, hit me with an axe in the back of the head. I bounced back from that. It seemed like I was always bouncing back from madness, and I must have been blessed. I must have been blessed 100%. And, religion hasn't been an easy thing for me, because I struggle with going in churches and being around people. And I like to do my own thing. You know, it's between me and God, I feel. And I like to pray a lot, pray for my family. But those holy books, they can be confused. And I remember once doing a Bible study off the Bible on my phone. My phone went off. I got my Bible out. It said something totally different. I was like, what? There's different version. I was like, how was that? So I started trying to study biblical Hebrew and trying to find out. And in the end, I just realized that, you know, when you put your faith in God, everything's going to be okay. It doesn't matter to me what the religion is. You know, people are living for God, you're living to be good. That's good enough for me. You know, I just think that everybody's on their own journey, just like in martial arts. You know, not one martial art is the best, but it might be the best for somebody. I just think that, I don't know, I just think it's between you. I never go around trying to get people to believe in what I believe in, for instance. And, you know, I know some people are all about they're trying to pull people into their belief, but I just think that whatever's right for you, you know, if you're right with God, you'll find your own way. That's the way I live my life now.
Well, it's so funny you said it, because as you were saying it again, these are the conversations I like the best, because we're there and I have a roadmap of where I want to take it. And like, there is one thing that we're going to have to go in at the end, which I have to do, because if I don't, like, I'll be raging and I'll be using an excuse to get you for another one, which I will do again. But you were just saying there about, you know, it's everybody's journey, and we can really use religion basically as the framework for it, right? So, but the parallels between that and martial arts are unreal. I have learned way more from hanging around with white belts and blue belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu than after a purple belt than I ever did from a black belt, because they were basically, I needed to see a different interpretation. I needed to see their perspective from it. And then when just as you were saying that, it's like, I have it with life, I have it with work, I have it with nearly every relationship, where I used to, if I didn't like somebody, I'd immediately dismiss them out of hand because they had nothing to give me, nothing to teach. And I don't mean give me, but there was no reason to invest my time. You understand what I mean? And then I found out that the more that I met someone that I thought was ignorant of it, it was like they just weren't brainwashed by the doctrine that I had. So it's like, you know, if you look at jiu-jitsu now, it's like you see these white belts and blue belts, because it brings us right back to the whole believing a round kick works to the head, because they're doing mad ass shit and you're going, that isn't going to work. And then it works. And then you go, oh yeah, that was the lightning in the bottle. That was the jumping, spinning back kick.
Belief.
Exactly. It's unreal, man. I tell you what, stuff like that gets me. Now, we are going to wrap up on this, and it isn't the best way to wrap up on a podcast, but yeah. Years ago, I saw a comedian, Johnny Vegas, and Johnny Vegas said, no matter how bad your act was, you've got to go out on a high. He said he learnt that. He said from the best. And it was like, who? And he said, well, yeah, I learnt it from a red coat at Butlins once. He said, learned it more from Frank Sinatra. And I was listening to it. I was thinking, what does he mean? And it's like, if you're going to go out, you're going to go bum, ba-da-dum, bum, bum, ba-da-dum. New York, New York. You go out on a big number, right? Because when you go out, people will just remember the big number. That's the last thing, right? So I've got to ask you, and it's a little bit disjointed, and apologies to guys who are watching, and apologies to Will, because there's no way you're going to be able to weave this in, right, at all, because it's my ADHD brain at work, right? Yeah, Will says he can do. Will, you're not that much of a miracle worker, right? So we talked about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We talked about faith. We talked about having belief in yourself, redemption. And
redemption's tailor-made for the wretched, Tucky Williams said.
Exactly. It is. And this guy is in no way, shape or form wretched. He's in fact one of the loveliest men. We only talked about this last week. I hadn't seen him in the flesh for 7 years, which was Eric Paulson. And there's no way that we can have a conversation.
Mighty man of God.
Yeah, but the thing is, this is the way that I'm linking this in, because it looked like it was disjointed, but it isn't. I've saved the best for last, because it's the thing that connected me and you. And I don't know, were you training with Eric before we met, or How did you get in with Eric?
You were telling me I need to trim them. Can you remember? You know, yeah.
Do you know what? I was hoping that my memory hadn't failed me, because I remember wearing a pair of Eric Paulson shorts and you saying to me, I really want to train with him. And I said,
I was always a big fan.
Yeah. So how did you meet? I'm glad that I can take half of the credit for it. Well, not even that.
This, when I said about this Martial Arts Illustrated magazine advertised a seminar with Mauricio and Hodja.
Yes.
It also advertised a seminar with Eric Paulson up at Rick Young's Academy. So since Eric was about to teach, so I sent off a postal order as you did back in the day. And it was the Eric Paulson seminar was the week after the Gracie seminar. My card didn't work on that morning, so I couldn't go. Yes. And the crazy thing is, if I'd have went there, there's no way I would have went to Brazil, not a chance. I wouldn't have wanted jiu-jitsu because catch wrestling's my thing, I love all martial arts, but for me, it's grappling in its purest form. You're allowed to do any submission. You win by pin or submission. There's no belt, there's no hierarchy. You get on the mat, you're as good as you are that day. No one cares if you're injured, you're getting it. It's like full on 100%. That's just what it is, And had it just been off to America, but God obviously had different plans because I had to go down that dark road until I could reach, the narrow path. And then, I just feel that I met Saint Eric at the right time. And whenever I go and see him, I like to get out there. Usually I get out there twice a year. Like in the last decade, I would have been out there once this year. But it's I don't know. He'll say something, and it might not be even about martial arts. He'll say something, and it resonates for me. And it's a massive, massive help. For me, having him there, like a huge help.
Well, you see, I can tell the story now. So I first got started in JKD and Carly. I used to read about Rick Young, Eric, Bob Breen, Terry Barnett, Danny Nosanto, and I got into karate, trained with Jeff over here, went over to Germany, trained in Muay Thai over there, a bit of Wing Chun there as well. And then at 32, I had a bit of a moment like yourself. I went on a stag weekend and I was still training really hard, 31, 32. And I was training really, really hard, but I was not living the life I was supposed to live. And I was like, this isn't me. And went on this stag do, went over to Spain, drank for 4 days, like solid with all the guys, Red Bull and vodka. And literally, it's funny because it's all, its perspective's really funny because I thought I was dying. So I was lying in bed, my skin was on fire, and it was the taurine, and I had alcohol poisoning. And I remember speaking to my brother afterwards, and he says, "You just got the DTs, man." But he said that to me about 6 months after this had happened. I remember lying down on my bed, and I was going, "God, if you get me out of this, I promise, I may not go all in. I might not be opening up a super church for you, or anything like that. But I swear to God, if you get me out of here, I won't be this guy anymore." And then I got, a day later, I felt better, but I had to have a day in bed where I was really out of body experience. And then I was like, right, okay, I can't drink anymore. And because I'd stopped drinking, the mad thing about drinking is when I stopped drinking, I lost 80% of my social circle. My social circle still had guys that I trained with, but we never did. I'm very good at compartmentalizing. So if I go out drinking with you, you'll never come and train with me. And I don't like that. Chris, we get guys who allow different parts of their world to overlap, and you go, no. Yeah. I don't want any of that because you and him won't like each other and I'll be in the middle of it. So anyway, I remember thinking to myself, right, so I need to do something that's got an addictive personality. First of all, is what have I always wanted to do? I've always wanted to ride a motorbike. I'd never ridden a motorbike in my life. So I went, bought a motorbike. So I did my CBT, compulsory basic training, bought a motorbike, didn't tell the wife, parked it up in my brother-in-law's house, did it, passed the test, got the bike. Now what do I want to do? I want to get really back into my training properly. Because I was training well, but I was training 2-3 times a week. You know what I mean? So I got into that. And I was at a generic gym in Coventry, like a village hotel. And I saw this sign for Thai boxing. I was like, wicked, I'll go there. And it was Lucky Madahar, Pindy's dad, right? And I went there, trained. And I was like,
"Is Pindy's dad a coach also?"
Yeah, he is. He was the first guy. So look, he was the first guy that I did JKD and Carly with, right? And then I trained with them for a few years and helped them set up their first gym, actually. And Pindy was a kid; he was still at school. Pindy's a great guy. And then we'd go into a load of seminars, and then I wanted to do jiu-jitsu, wanted to do more training with Terry Barnett. And then, like, you know, Lucky was like, you know, you can't train there, I'm trained here as well. And it's like, because me and him are really cool now, but it was like me and him said, it was really funny because at the time he felt really like betrayed that I'd left. And then I couldn't believe why he made such a big thing out of it. And then when I got a couple of guys and got them to black belt and they left me, I was like, I totally get where you're coming from. I can understand why you're getting so emotive over it. And then me and Pindy went over to America. We trained Rick Faze, trained in Seattle, Pindy would leave me and then he'd go to Eric's, and every time Eric was in town, he'd train. And it was cool. We trained. And then for the last 7 years, I've never trained. I didn't train with Eric. And then out of the blue, I met Pindy's dad at a garage. I bumped in and we had a good hour and a half, 2 hour conversation. Really, really good. And he said, I just feel really bad, you know, because we didn't ever really have to fall out, did we? And I went, no. I said, but, you know, it's just good that we're back here. And, you know, that's the mad thing, isn't it? Because when everything gets sorted, you just go, well, instead of dwelling on what we've lost, let's look forward to what we can do. And then Pindy rang me and he says, I've got Eric in town. Do you want to come and train? And I went, are you sure? And he goes, I'd love you to train. He said, Eric's been asking about you as well. He goes, we go there. Dave Lee was there. James was there from Academy. Like there was a load of us, but it was bizarre because there was like 12 of us on the mat and all of us had sort of started grappling through Eric, but we were all black belts now. Amazing. And it was unreal. And it was like Eric said,
he's the coach's coach.
He is the coach's coach. And Eric turned around to me and goes, it's been too long. It's been way too long. And I went, Eric, it's a nightmare. I said, this is what happens. Life gets in the way. And it was like, I'm not going to share what he said, but he said something to me which just blew me away, which then kept me thinking for like 72 hours straight. Like, yeah, and I was like, how profound is this? And like Eric's, like some of the best moments I've ever had. Like we were at the after party when Lesnar fought Herring in 2008. Me, Eric, Hegan was with us as well. Yeah, Joe Rogan, Eddie Bravo, Cindy Crawford, Josh Siddiqui, my good friend Josh, Greg Nelson. And I'm there, and I'm like, how? Like, I'm a kid from Coventry.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm a kid from Coventry. How have I ended up here? And it like this all brings it back to the environment thing. It was like I'm so glad that I
want to be a millionaire mixed with millionaires. It's that, isn't it? You've got to put yourself in the right room around the right people.
Yeah, exactly that. It's like I'm so glad that my memory hadn't played tricks on me, because I do remember. I remember saying to you needed to do that, and it was like because I knew you were always into it. And
being around Eric makes me a better person, you know.
Unreal.
Important.
And so before we wrap up, first of all, how can people? I'd like you just to quickly talk about your book, and then how people can get in contact with you. And then I know, like, even I'm tempted for this program that you're going to do, which is basically encapsulating all grappling, whatsoever, like everything. So if you can just explain first of all the book, and then this course that's coming up, please.
It is my second book, No Holds Barred, My Life in the Violent Art of Catch Wrestling. Basically, it's a 10 years of me competing catch wrestling, training at a world level, taking on ex-UFC champions, many world catch wrestling champions, you know, D1 American wrestlers, British freestyle champions, British combat wrestling champions, like a who's who of catch wrestlers. I went out there and, you know, I mixed it up with them. Some, you know, stories about my exploits, because a lot of behind the scenes things, you know, some fun stories and also a little bit of motivation in there. I like to try to motivate people. So funny stories as well, a little bit about the doors and a little bit about how I grew up really getting into being a fan of pro wrestling and whatnot as a youngster, and obviously being from the north of England, watching WWE, like the British Bulldog was a big thing, Davey Boy Smith. And then 2 years ago, I actually went out to America and wrestled his son in a catch wrestling match. You know, Harry Smith was a monster of a man. Yeah.
What was he like?
So strong, you know, and I've trained with him as well. For me, you know, of all the people I've went up against or trained against, he is like what I'd call a pure catch wrestler, because when you think about it, he was left at home, like while his father was out competing. He was like with his grandfather, Stu Hart, who was a catch wrestling legend, a pro wrestling legend. There's videos in there where people are screaming in his dungeon while he's putting submissions on them. So he's like, he's grown up around that. Can you imagine what that's like? You know, and he's like 130 kilos, isn't he? 6'6", whatever he is. He spent a lot of time with Billy Robinson, Josh Barnett. And when you're wrestling with him, just his reactions and whatnot, it's purely catch wrestling, where for me, Josh Barnett's the most well-rounded grappler that we've had. When you look at it, he was the youngest ever UFC heavyweight champion. Yeah. He won the no-gi jiu-jitsu world after getting given his black belt just to go and do it.
By way
champion,
of catch.
Wrestler, judo, he's mixed it up, hasn't he? And he spent a lot of time with Josh as well. So to get to compete against Harry was great. Eric was there, and it's the first time I've been with Eric and Josh, in the same room, because a big part of me wanted to train with Eric as well. Was obviously Josh Barnett's coach. I'd met Josh, and I'd always watched. I like Josh's style, the way that he wrestles. He's probably similar height and weight to me. So I tried to take things from people who were similar. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to do things what Marcelo Garcia does. I'm not saying I can do things what Josh Barnett does, but that game's going to suit me more,
Yeah.
And Josh ended up. I've trained with Josh while I was part of CSW, but it was when he was here in England just after he'd had his last UFC fight. He came over.
Oh, I remember he did a tour. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was fantastic. So it was really good to be actually in a room with them both. I've not been on the mat with them both. That'd be. I'd love that. That'd be fantastic. And for me now, with martial arts, it's just about creating memories. Just getting out there and being around great people and learning from them. And if I get a chance to get out and compete against good people, well, that's just icing on the cake, isn't it?
But it is. It's like me personally, I look at it and I'm just a bit of a fanboy, really. Like when you were talking about wrestling there, it's mad because if people don't know about and we will probably have to get you for a part 2 now, Chris, because you've got me going.
We can speak about catching part 2.
But you see, this is the thing. It's like we'll wrap up on this because we talked about the hard start, right? The hard, like the rough initiation that you've got to go through in any real legitimate martial art. You've got to go through it. And when you mentioned Stuart Hart, it's like that. There was a reason why so many complicated individual like Benoit, but Benoit came through, Malenko came through, like the Dynamite Kid, like Tom Billington. I still watch him now and can't believe, what an example of having to separate the artist from the art with that bloke, right? But it's that whole thing where it's like, when we talk about how tough it had to be, and especially, and this is a good way to round it up, because I didn't plan this, by the way. So we started off and we started talking about esoteric martial arts and going to Brazil and Jesus, man, I don't even know. I can't even remember who was the guy who started Magendo. Was it George Bruckner?
No, what it may be. I can't remember. It was a long time. 1986 when I was.
But that was famous. No, but
it meant no limits, didn't it? That was.
Well, you see, it was famously, it used to get chastised as being a made-up martial art, and I used to always.
It was steeped in karate, wasn't it? But then they jumped in the full contact kickboxing arena.
They did. Well, you see, this is the thing. It's like, so we start off with traditional martial arts, then the boxing, then the kickboxing. Go to Brazil, do all that, and then we've managed to get it back to where we'll have to go part 2, is because most people in this country don't understand just how steeped in history we were for wrestling. And like the Lancashire, like the Northumberland,
London as well. London that was going on down there as well. Yeah,
it was mad, and it was mad how all the styles were just cultural. And it always brings me back to this thing that I always think about martial arts is the fact that, when it's on your doorstep, you don't appreciate it. You know what I mean? I've got to go to Japan to learn karate, and you're like, no, how old are you? No, you're 55. Right, okay. Well, if you wanted to be a kid and learn karate, mate, you just had to go to the Red Triangle Club or go down and see Tiki Donovan, because those guys were doing way more legit than the Japanese were doing. We took it.
Testing it for real.
Every day of the week. Bro, it's like, mate, first of all, can I get you back for a part 2 where we can talk?
It's going to be a pleasure. And also, you asked me to mention this course that's coming up. I forgot to mention it.
No, go ahead.
I'd just like to add, before we go, I have a 6-month masterclass. Why masterclass? Because recently I got a hold of the DVD of the masterclass that we were chatting about with Jeff Thompson. I was watching. I was like, man, this was a blast. I loved it. I thought, I'm going to do a masterclass. I thought I'll base it around catch wrestling combatives. Because, for me, catch wrestling is super combative. Whenever I was on the doors and whatnot, I was using catch wrestling more than anything. Why? Because stand-up grappling, for the most part, I didn't want it to go down there. So I'm just going to be teaching you things that your dad would have taught you if he was a catch wrestler, really, yeah. Old school, tried and tested techniques that are going to work. A lot of the techniques are illegal. I used to train with a guy, John Calvert, back in his garage in like 2001, and he called it illegal old wrestling holds, he called it, extreme fighting. And it was all neck cranks, face bars, so easy to learn. I'm going to be teaching them, bits of ripping and tearing, and just really trying to get people involved in catch wrestling, not just for the sport, but for the self-protection aspect, because you don't really see catch wrestling taught with that self-protection in mind. But at the end of the day, if you can put somebody out quickly with a hook, you need to learn it. It's perfect for security guys.
Well, you see, this is it, right? So you just said two things, right? And I always pride myself on this. When anyone ever asks me what my jiu-jitsu game is, I'm like, it's outside the Binley Mega Chippy jiu-jitsu, right? One on one. That's the rook, right? And then you use two terms here, and this is good. Now you're going to know that I am actually, when it comes to wrestling, Chris, I'm a mark, mate. I'm a proper mark. Because what was the two things you said? I'll teach you how to rip and I'll teach you how to hook. And back in the days, a ripper and a hooker, they were the two guys, weren't they?
Yeah.
They're like those guys who did catch wrestling, especially the carnival wrestling, and they were like, and you know what? And we'll sign off. I
competed in the last wrestling booth. They brought the wrestling booth out again. I went and competed in 2015. Yeah, I competed in the States like 2 weeks before. I had a 20-minute time limit draw in Costa Mesa against the big mountain of a guy, Christopher Morales, who went on to become world champion. And then I went in the wrestling booth. There was lots of talk online, but in the end, I only had to go with one guy, Joe Kowalski. He was from the Snake Pit in Wigan, but I never met. He was there for freestyle. He was British freestyle wrestling champion at the time, but he did catch out in America because he was half American. He was ex-US Marine. And the rule set was 3 5-minute rounds. A pin or a submission was a point. And I felt I had a point to prove that day. And I went out there and I won 15-0. I've never, ever felt so good in my entire life. I was in a wrestling ring. That day, that was the day when it all came together.
Oh, beautiful. So, and the usual, just get you on social media. What's your website?
Media, you can get me on the website, LPW MMA. You can catch me. I'm on Instagram a lot.
Legit Pro Wrestling, man.
Legit Pro Wrestling, yeah. It's easy to get a hold of. And people are more than welcome to come and join us and experience the violent art for themselves.
Well, what we'll do next time is we'll talk a little bit more, if that's all right with you, about Farmer Burns, Hackenschmidt,
all the old timers,
both the Gotches, like
Dan Kolav.
Oh well, the way I got into catch wrestling was I remember reading about it in the old magazines where it was catch as catch can, and I was like, what is that? This? What is this? And then it goes, it's up north, and I'm like, no, but you got that. Like Oriental people are able to fight. We're not able to fight. And I remember saying that to Jeff Thompson. And Jeff won't admit this now. Well, he might do. Because I said to Jeff, yeah, what do you reckon? He goes, who won both wars? And I went, what? And he was like, he didn't say anything anti-Japanese or anti-German, but he just said who won both wars. But again, that was it. But Chris.
Look who trained Sakuraba, the Gracie hunter, Billy Robinson. Man from Wigan.
Well, you see this again, like, we're going to have to deep dive into this because
I've got some great stories about when I managed to meet Billy. Some great stories about that we'll speak about next time.
We would
definitely had a big impact on the way I wanted to take things with my martial arts journey. 100%.
Really, yeah. Nathan Leverton had him down.
Yeah, Nathan had him on that same tour.
Yeah, we did. I remember. I missed out on that tour, but it was like Nathan said. It was one of those where we were just catching him at the tail end. Like
Matt Goddard was on that one, I'm sure Matt Goddard defended it.
Yeah, I think he was on it. Yeah, he was. But Chris, as always, it's a joy, mate. You are one of the. You are one of the good
so happy
guys.
that you had me on. Thank you very much.
Hey man,
takes one to know one, Mick.
Try my best, man. I try my best. But you're looking well. Hey, I tell you what, we had to get the Irish and Celtic in somewhere, right? Hey, I tell you what, I was Irish and in the Midlands, and we didn't have it anywhere near as rough. Well, I haven't said that. We did have it pretty rough. But Chris, it's been wonderful. Have a great 2025, and I'll speak to you soon, brother.
All the best. Bye,
big
brother.
love, man.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
When you visit Arizona, time is measured in moments, not minutes. Like the moment your work stress disappears as you kayak through the canyons. Or the moment you discover the life-changing effects of prickly pear chocolate. But nothing beats the moment you see the Grand Canyon for the very first time. Visit a new state of mind. Learn more at hereyouareaz.com.